Okay. Guys, just checking that we are all live everywhere. This is the first time going live on X, Twitter. I have no idea if it's live or not. We'll find out soon enough. You guys are on TikTok. Guys, if you have any questions about your back pain, sciatica, or anything like that, then you can post it down in the comments. I'm going to start off today's live session. It looks like YouTube's running. I'm going to start off today's live session talking about walking, specifically, for back pain and sciatica recovery, because quite often people understand it incorrectly and they end up getting themselves in trouble. And so one of the big things to understand when you have your lower back injury down here, most of you guys struggling with back pain are going to have, or sciatica, are going to have the root cause. So the bulging or herniated disc, something like that, is going to be down here at L5-S1. So that's the last segment of your lumbar spine between the green and the orange, or L4-5 between the green and the green here. That's where the origin is going to be. And beyond that first instance that you have of back pain or sciatica, or the recent flare-up, much of the pain that you experience, for example, first thing in the morning, is going to be because there's congestion, there's excess inflammation that's built up overnight. And this is one of the big challenges with lower back injuries. If we look at the model here, you can see there's a finite space, right, where the nerves come out. And if we've got a bit of disc occupying that space because it's bulged or herniated, and that's driving an inflammatory process, perfectly normal, right? It happens in our knee, it happens in our ankle, our wrist, they swell up a little bit. And it's not a big issue. Yeah, it makes it a bit stiff, but it's not a problem. Why? Because there's lots of stretchy tissue around here. In the lower back, however, there is a confined space. It is not stretchy, it is bony. And this is why so many of you guys get told or instructed or look online and see people doing all sorts of bending and twisting exercises. Oh, do these knee rocks first thing in the morning, hug your knees first thing in the morning, all of those kind of things to manage this space, to increase the size of this space, because when we bend forwards, we increase the size of the space by moving the two bony sides apart from one another. Very, very reasonable, right? The problem is that that comes at a cost, right? By you doing this, you're driving more pressure through the front part of the disc, you're straining all the tissues on the back, and I liken this, especially first thing in the morning, to the person that, you've gone to sleep, you've got a graze on your elbow, right? And you're like, oh, it was bleeding yesterday, but it seems to have patched up. And you go to put your shirt on, and boom, you bend your elbow, you rip the scab off, and it starts bleeding again. So there's high amplitude, high range of motion movements that take place, hugging the knees, rocking, etc., first thing in the morning, often too much. So where does walking come into this? Walking is a mechanism by which you can, in a relatively upright position, hopefully, ideally, you can get a little bit of movement. There are small undulations, pressure changes that are taking place in your spine when you're moving around. And so walking forms very firmly, or falls very firmly, within the category of relief-based work, meaning it is relieving the stress and strain of daily life on that lower back, or more specifically, it's relieving the stress and strain that comes from accumulation of inflammation in this area. And so that walking helps manage the buildup of inflammation down there. It works very nicely if we combine it with something like contrast bathing, icing of that specific area, but for shorter durations, not 20 minutes of ice, that's not ideal, 3 to 5 minutes. And things like the bed decompression, the towel decompression. Those are relief-based strategies. Where people fall foul with walking specifically is that they start walking for walking's sake. For some people, walking actually feels good, and that's great, but they're walking for 3, 4, 5 hours a day because it feels nice and helps them feel better afterwards, and that's not rehab. And what happens is, in that instance, it's taking away from time that could be spent doing work that's actually going to get your back stronger and healthier again, and therefore we're in this vicious cycle. We have a flare-up, we do our walking, we kind of things stabilize, then we have another flare-up again, and if your flare-ups are caused by not doing a deadlift with 100 kilos or 200 kilos, if your deadlift was picking up the cat, if your deadlift was feeding the dog, if your deadlift was getting dressed in the, sorry, not deadlift, if your flare-up was getting dressed in the morning, you don't have a strong and healthy back, and you haven't effectively rehabilitated and done the proper strengthening work since your last episode. And that's something that traps so many people out. It really does. And because walking for some, not everybody, right? Some people can't walk 10 steps without getting pain. So for you guys, that's different, right? But for those that can walk, walking within aggravation-free limits and putting limitation on the duration so you're not just wasting your time is really, really important. I got a bunch of comments on TikTok. I'm going to go through these now, guys, and just catch up on those. So if you guys have any comments on TikTok, if you have any on YouTube, you can always post them down here. I don't know whether we're actually live on X or not. So if you are happening to come across it over there, then please do post in the comments on the platform that you're on. So just going back through these because I saw some questions coming in. Where were we? So hello, so this is damnation. Had a slip disc in April and have very slowly gotten better thanks to, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah. One of the big mistakes that people make with rehab is not understanding that rehabilitative exercises are specific exercises that are progressive, that are going to rebuild you, right? And they don't make the distinction between rehab and relief-based practices. Relief-based practices are like the walking. They're like other stretches that we talk about, other relief-based strategies. In the program, we have the relief-based strategies, you know, the phase 1 routine, et cetera, that provide relief from the stress and strain of daily life. Those things, often you can do some of those stretches or some of those strategies and you'll feel better more or less straight away. If you do a hamstring stretch, for example, done correctly, of course, you're going to more or less instantly feel some element of relief because it's putting less, providing you do it correctly, of course, which many people don't. You're going to feel that there's less pull on your lower back because the hamstrings insert into the ischial tuberosity and that pulls the lumbar spine into a degree of flexion. It makes it more stiff. So you've got a bit more movement through the hips, which lessens the burden on the lumbar spine. So you feel that instantly. But like Damnation's comment, when you're doing strengthening work, rehab work, there is this period that actually you have to start out by learning the exercise. It's not a foregone conclusion that you can actually do the exercises effectively. And so you need to spend a bit of time learning how to do them. And then you need to do them at an effective intensity to actually affect change within the body. And that does take time. So if you're expecting to do a squat for the first time, have your back moving all over the shot, or a dead bug and wobbling all over the place, and expect to feel better afterwards, you're sorely mistaken. You have to learn how to do that. And the very fact that you can't do that without aggravation is a great sign, because it's like, man, some people are struggling. Some of you guys are commenting, you've had this back pain for months to years. And you're like, I've tried everything. And then you go and try a dead bug. And it's like, if you'd successfully tried doing exercises like the dead bug, like the squat, and mastered them, then you would be better. But the point is you can't. And that's great news. If you find you can't lie on your back on the floor and wiggle your leg without your back being moved all over the shop, you don't have appropriate levels of competence in your lumbar spine. And that's great, because you can improve that. Nobody can improve that for you, but you can improve that. And that firmly puts the ball back in your court with regards to going, hey, I may not have got better for a long period of time. I may be feeling a little bit hopeless, but actually now there's something I know I can improve. I know I need to improve. And I've identified the leak, and I can at least start setting about fixing that issue. So some more comments. Should I stay away from yoga, Pilates, and twisting movements? Yes, I would avoid those for the foreseeable future. You need to focus on spine stability for a significant amount of time. You have an injury. Where's my spine? My spine's over here. You have an injury to your lower back. When you have an injury, you have injured the structures that maintain integrity at the level of the joint. So let's just say it's L4-5 that was a disc herniation. And to be clear, you don't get disc herniations without some element of damage of the other ligaments, because the way in which the spine and the body works, everything's interconnected and tissues support one another in their function and in the way in which they move in the real world. So if you've strained one, you've strained most likely other companion tissues, let's say, in the lumbar spine. And the thing with these tissues is they heal very slowly, over matters of months, not over matters of weeks. And you need to go about re-strengthening them. So the extension of healing is strengthening, re-strengthening. And that takes a long period of time. And so focusing on rebuilding that strength in the neutral, you're going to get little bits of movement creeping through the lumbar spine on a daily basis. No one is able to completely isolate the lower back, although trying is really important in the early days. But focus on building back up your load tolerance. That's the best and most reliable way of you to test the integrity of your lumbar spine and how it's working. And if you do that effectively and get to a certain level, I'll talk about 3 thresholds, if you will, for spinal loading, so you guys can have some kind of markers or milestones. Then once you've reached the upper milestones, you can then ask yourself the question, do I have now appropriate levels of hip mobility? And once you've got appropriate levels of hip mobility, then you can consider if you need to add in any spinal mobility work. And Jay Manga said, disc degeneration and joint arthritis exercises, that is exactly what we're talking about here, Jay Manga on YouTube. So listen closely. So the exercises that we are doing as our primary mechanism for load tolerance and building that load tolerance would be the squat and the hip hinge, done correctly with aggravation-free form, with correct choreography, of course. And so the first milestone is you take your body weight. You take half of your body weight, because that's the upper body. And every single one of you, no matter how bad your back is and no matter how much it hurts, you're going to sit on the toilet seat frequently, right? As is normal. Okay? If you're taking certain medications that give you constipation, you might be there a little bit more frequently. But when you are sat down, you're sitting on the side of the bed in the evening and in the morning, most likely. You'll sit at some point, and it might be painful, but you're going to do it anyway. This is the important point to be bearing in mind. And so when you are sitting, you are putting anywhere from 40 to 90% more load through the lumbar spine. of half of your body, right? Not the whole body. So we have to be fair. So for example, for me, I weigh about 92 kilos. So around about 50 kilos worth of upper body weight is on my lower lumbar spine, L5-S1 specifically, maybe L4-5 to a certain degree as well. And so 40% of that is around about 20 kilos. 90% of that is around about 45 kilos. So the first two milestones are, can you do a squat or a hip hinge with those two loads? And if you can't, that's your primary focus. The third milestone for guys is 100% of your body weight, and for ladies is 75% of your body weight. If you can do 10 reps of squats or hip hinges with good form, without aggravation, great. Now you have met a good threshold level. Now look at your hips. Do your hips have appropriate levels of mobility? Because we know for a fact to get to that level of loading on a squat or a hip hinge, they're going to have good strength. And strength is the thing that so many of you guys are missing. You don't have the appropriate strength and control. And in the process of getting to that kind of level, you're going to have very, very good coordination because you've learned it, because you've done countless numbers of repetitions, and you've really built a strong support network for that lumbar spine. Those are the three thresholds. Then look at your hips. And then if you absolutely need to, we can start having a look at whether we want to do any bendy, twisty exercises as well. What other comments have we got here on TikTok? Quite a few messages. Sorry about this, guys. Let's have a look. And guys, if you're on YouTube, like J Mango, you can always post any comments you guys have. This is a Q&A, so here to help. I can't even sit properly. A very good comment here. So Area said, I can't even sit properly. It's very reasonable that you can't sit properly. Just like if you'd broken your left leg, you wouldn't be able to hop on your left leg properly. You have an injured structure. When you sit, as I've just mentioned here, and this might have come in before I started talking about this ERI, when you're sitting, you're putting more load through the lumbar spine. If you've got a lower back injury, most people will have some involvement of the disc to some degree, whether it's formally mentioned or not. And you can deduce this by pairing up the physical examination, the commentary, the symptoms, etc., with any imaging you might or might not have had to understand that, yes, there might well be some facet joint involvement, some disc involvement, some other ligament involvement. But generally speaking, we injure a segment. We don't injure one specific tiny little part. That's only really relevant for the surgeon who wants to poke it with a needle or cut it with a scalpel. And so if you're sitting and it's causing you pain, well, that makes a lot of sense. And so the only way to improve that, people focus on the sitting, people focus on the fact they can't walk, they can't drive, they can't do this, which is understandable entirely. But focus on the rehab, building back the tolerance for sitting, standing, etc. Because if you're over here and you're doing some squats with and you've built up to the 5 kilos, or maybe you've built up to the 7 or the 10 kilos, but you weigh the same as me, and sitting puts at the very minimum an extra 20 kilos of load, is it any wonder if I'm only able to squat or hip hinge with 5 kilos, and I know that 7.5 is currently too much for me, is it any wonder that sitting's a problem? Well, of course not. I'm not conditioned for that. I haven't built up to that point. But what you will notice is as you progress through the process of rehabilitation work, in the case of the program, for those of you guys that are members, as you progress through phases 1, 2, 3, and 4, you will build resilience back into your spine. And as a consequence, you will notice that you can sit for longer. You will notice that you can walk for longer. You will notice that it doesn't hurt as much in the morning, etc. The comments here, what else we got? How do I deal with the pain of DDD? Kez, exactly what I've just been talking about. You focus on the rehab. There's kind of 3 components to actually dealing with the pain of these kind of things. And I suppose it ties into Jay Manga's comment on disc degeneration on YouTube. You've got to have rehab work. Rehab is the stuff that gets you stronger, that changes your body, that teaches you how to control your movement in your spine, that teaches you how to build the tissues back up again, and ultimately in the longer term, actually strengthens those damaged sections of the spine again. You've got relief-based work, the stuff that helps you along the way, the stuff that helps manage things like the bed decompression, like the towel decompression, like walking would come under that relief category if it helps you within aggravation-free distances. Contrast bathing to manage the inflammation in this area. Those are relief-based practices. They are temporary, they are short-term. You have to do them regularly. They don't accumulate. You can't just do them for 6 months and think you're going to be better, even if you feel better as a consequence of doing so. You haven't built anything. That's the rehab. And then you need education because you need to understand this sort of stuff better so you can more effectively navigate your day and live with your back, because it's not like other areas of the body where it's put somewhere else or it's protected from daily basis. You have to provide the protection, and a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So there are little ways you're tripping yourself up on a daily basis. Jay Mango said, I can sit for an hour, but I can't drive. When I drive, I can only sit for 20 minutes. Most of that will be due to the positioning of you in the car, for example. So let's just say you're driving a manual car. When you're sitting and chilling out at home, you might be sat something like this. Maybe you're reclined in the chair. Well, reclining in the chair puts less pressure on the lumbar spine. When you're in the car, you might have a bit of a bucket to the seat of your car, so your legs are up like so instead of flat down. This is immediately pulling my lumbar spine into flexion. You've then also got your legs out. That's pulling on the hamstrings. If you've got a lower back injury with hamstring involvement, those hamstrings are going to pull on the lumbar spine as you're operating the clutch and the pedal. And so that's putting more strain on the lumbar spine. When you're sitting in the car, there's more forces pulling you into that position, which loads the disc more. Whereas when you're sat more relaxed at home, you don't have those same factors at play, those same pulling forces at play, and therefore it's not quite as bad, quite as quickly. Other comments on TikTok. Been doing the core 5 for back from sciatica, really struggle with the marching bridges. One of the big things you guys can do, I'll show you guys this actually, it'll be quite good. One of the big challenges with the marching bridges is that people don't focus on the right part. And the reason that we choose the marching bridges, you'd be forgiven for misunderstanding, because bridges are often included. And people say, oh, you're going to do a bridge for your back pain and that's going to get you stronger. No, it's not. The bridge is not getting you stronger, right? The bridge, the marching bridge, is teaching you how to integrate the leg muscles with the core to provide stability on one side. And it's off weight bearing, so it's a safe environment to learn this skill. So what happens is when people do the bridge, they think it's a bridge exercise to strengthen the glutes. It's not, because it's never going to do that, because the squat's going to be more challenging. So this is just an inferior exercise, if that's what you're trying to do. But so they get into the bridge and they bring up here, well, they're arching their lower back, that's a problem. So they come up, you just come up an inch off the ground. All we're trying to do is create an environment where we've got our core engaged, and we are then working to get one leg off the ground, and then get the other leg off the ground. Now, one thing that can really help here is you actually take this leg, and before you lift, you plant it into the ground. You press it down, and you press it down. As you press it down, nothing moves, but you see the hamstring engage, the glutes engage, and then that makes this leg go light. And then you do exactly the same. You engage this side with the core, and then this leg goes light, and so on and so forth. The reason that you're getting pain when you do the marching bridge is because you're not effectively providing stability. So either you're twisting and rocking left and right when you're doing the lifting or the engaging, or you're kicking your bum up too high and you're arching your lower back. The bridges are so often given out as exercises. The bridge, for an exercise to build strength, you need to understand, and this is sometimes, this isn't, well, not sometimes, frequently, it just doesn't seem to be understood. For an exercise to build strength, it actually needs to challenge you. There are no strengthening exercises, or we could say the converse. All exercises are strengthening exercises. How you do the exercise in the session and over the course of successive sessions over the course of time will dictate whether a strengthening outcome will occur. If you just keep doing bridges, 10 bridges on the floor, while you're perfectly capable of doing 10 squats with a barbell with 10 kilos, even 10 bodyweight squats, the bridge is doing nothing to strengthen you, because it's not actually working at a level high enough to exact change. It's like a light switch. It has to click in order for the lights to turn on. If you press it a little bit, but the click doesn't happen, then nothing happens. And the same thing with strengthening. Strengthening is an outcome from training in the right way, at the right intensity, not a specific exercise. And that's, I think, quite an important concept that a lot of people just don't quite get. Soul Surfer has said, when I drive, I'm inclined. I'm assuming we're leaning back a little bit. Obviously, when we're driving, it's difficult to manage things. You know, inclining is quite helpful because it lessens the load on the spine, but obviously you want to be safe enough so you don't slide straight out the seatbelt. Pew Pew Devices has said, modified walking seems to have helped me. Slightly over balance threshold, forward lean, pushing the feet off as opposed to pulling. It's exposed the fact that I may be walking badly for decades. Interesting. What other comments have we got on TikTok over here? Quite a few. TikTok jumps so frequently and you just miss a bunch. What should I do if it's gotten worse over 5 months? I'm 17. If you're 17, what time of the year are we? We are in the summer, so you might have been off school right now. I don't know what you do, but have a look at what you're doing. If you're not doing productive work to rehabilitate these things, to fix these things, and you're struggling through it on your own, of course it's going to get worse. It's not, these things don't get better on their own. People often get told the myth, if you will, or the incorrect information that back pain heals on its own. I always remember a study being referenced, and I don't know if this has been done since because it was a long time ago that I was at university. But this particular study was talking about back pain, and it said the back pain gets better in 6 to 12 weeks on its own. And then it was like, according to research, and it was like, what's the research? And what transpired was that the main measure for whether back pain got better or not was whether the person came back to the GP. If you're not in the UK, that's a medical doctor, right? If the person did not come back to the GP, the doctor, in either a 6-week period or a 12-week period, something like that, then it was assumed that they had got better. And therefore the conclusion was that X number of people with back pain would get better on their own in 6 to 12 weeks by virtue of the fact they didn't get better. That is insane that was the criteria for concluding whether someone was better or not. And I've had it before, only around here. Some of you guys on TikTok will have heard me talk about this story before. I went to a conference with spinal surgeons and other surgeons, but the spinal surgeon specifically was talking about his waiting list, and his waiting list was so very long, and so many people wanted to see him. And he knew that back pain got better on its own, and this is what he'd tell his patients. And he said, back pain gets better on its own, and they don't need an injection from me or surgery from me. And I know this because people drop off my list. I said, hold on a second, pal. No, they don't. Do you follow up with them? Do you call them? And he goes, no, we just know. We don't follow up. We've got lots of people to talk to, blah, blah, blah. I said, you are, for someone who's just stood up there and talked about research for so long and how this, that, the other, to then say that's how you've concluded information that you're giving to patients is absolutely insane. Not least of all, because I see some of the guys that have dropped off your list and you didn't get them better and they didn't get better. I did in the clinic and with the rehab program. And so like there's these kind of things that go about there that makes this guy who's 17 think he should be getting better on his own. And the reason is, well, if he's not given guidance, he's going to continue to do the things that made the back bad in the first place. And you're not going to get better. And if you've got that kind of understanding or assumptions from the spinal surgeon, from the GPs and this, that, the other, and other medical professionals, is that, well, it heals on its own. Of course, everything heals on its own, right? Everything heals on its own. And we talk about this all the time. The back is trying to heal every single day. You don't have to do anything about it. No more do you have to think about your broken leg healing. It's not a conscious process. You don't think about that cut on your knee healing. You don't need to think about your disc healing. What you do need to think about is why your disc is not healing. And your disc is not healing is because you keep on messing it up. You keep on doing lots of little things that are interfering with the recovery process because these tissues down here do not heal quickly. They heal very slowly. And while you can get away with picking the scab on your elbow and the skin tissue turns over super fast and the next day it's kind of patched itself back up a little bit and it's moving on through the healing process, these tissues heal much, much more slowly. And we often don't have a good awareness of them. And the arm skin, where you've got that graze, isn't under strain every second of the waking day, whereas your spinal discs are. So we have to be more educated, and we have to understand that healing is trying to take place every day on its own, automatically, in all of us, every single one of us. But we have to be educated and supported in that education so that we can understand how to get out of the way of that healing process and let it actually occur. Other comments, what have we got here? I'm waiting for that, but I've decided to do the rehab. DJ Lady, I hope that rehab is avoiding maybe some surgery or some injections. I have a new disc extrusion, thankfully, just not touching the nerve. Can I fix it? Yes, you can. You just got to go through the rehab. Understand a couple of things about the disc extrusions, or the disc injuries, period, right? The fact that the disc material is out here is not the problem, although that can be a problem, especially if it's hitting the cauda equina. The problem is the fact that its annulus has failed, right? This is what the disc looks like, roughly speaking. Obviously, it's an anatomical model, so it's slightly different to this in the real world. But you've got the nucleus in the middle here. You've got the annulus. The annulus is the load-bearing structure in many ways because it is the annulus's integrity, basically a ring of ligaments like a water balloon, the skin of the water balloon, that holds the fluid in the place. So if the fluid is leaked out of the balloon, it's not the fluid's fault, it's the balloon skin's fault that's failed to hold the water in the balloon. And that's the same thing here. So we say, well, I've got a herniation, it's pressing on a nerve. Maybe I need to remove that, maybe I don't, right? Who knows? Depending on the circumstances and the symptoms, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing that needs to focus on is the healing of the annulus fibrosis. That's what we need to support with our rehabilitation process. That's the most important thing. And that's the part that's naturally trying to heal every single day. You have to, this is Morris Laura, you have to be supporting that process with the right sort of rehab, learning how to stabilize your spine. If you're wiggling and bending your spine all over the shop, that is not the right sort of stuff, but that's the stuff that's so frequently recommended. What other questions have we got here? I'm in for injections in my 2 herniated discs next week and I'm terrified. Is this a good thing? You should really have a good explanation provided to you by the specialists that are going to be delivering and administering the herniated discs. The question that you need to ask delivering and administering the injections into the herniated discs: how is this injection helping the healing take place? Now, what they might well be doing is doing steroid injections. It could be that they're doing PRP injections or stem cell injections, and there is a rationale that they might explain to you, say, look, we're going to inject these stem cells into the disc material, into the broken annulus, so that it helps with the healing process, and that's the idea behind the mechanism of action for our treatment. However, what I strongly suspect is actually the case is we're going to inject this area with some anti-inflammatory steroid injection or something like that, or we're going to do a nerve block in the fascia or whatever it may be. And how does that work, doc? And, well, it just calms down the inflammation. Does it help the healing? Not really. What is it supposed to do? Make you feel less pain. Okay, cool. How is that helping me heal? Now, what a good one would say is say, look, do you know what? Maybe it's just going to give you a little bit of respite so you can carry on and push on with your rehab. Because remember, whether it's a treatment like IDE therapy, like we do on the decompression room behind that wall, whether it's laser, whether it's an injection of any sort, whether it's any other intervention, the success of that, I would argue, the long-term success, depends upon whether that treatment up here is sat on a solid foundation of exercise rehabilitation work and education. All too often it is not. There is no education. It's just, we'll just do some injections and see what happens, and maybe if it works, then we can do another one in like 6 to 12 months, and maybe we'll go from there. That's the kind of answer that all too often is given to you guys when you have these kind of procedures. Not always. There are lots of really, really good guys and girls that are going to go through this and give you the appropriate support and talk to you about that. And we have members in the program where actually they've had a flare-up, they've had an injection, and it's just helped them turn a corner in the rehab, and it's been great because they've used it strategically. But injections are not standalone fixes. And all too often in our desperation, when we're struggling with raging sciatica down the leg or something like that, we just want something to take the pain away. And that is often where we get short-term happiness, if it works in that regard. And then we end up getting really despondent because, you know, it comes back in a couple of weeks' time afterwards. And remember, there's nothing without risk. So we have to consider that, and we should have that full discussion with the surgeon ahead of having these kind of procedures so that you understand that they understand what they're doing. Because it might be that you go to another clinician and they do exactly the same procedure, but they have the support. They understand how they are part of a wider and more strategic approach to your rehabilitation work. That's the most important thing. So hopefully that helps give you a bit of a heads up ahead of time. The person who asked that question, send us a DM because we've got a good podcast that talks about surgery, but you could by extension replace the word surgery with injections, and it talks about some questions you can ask before, during, and after the surgery to really help you. So just send us a DM and say, hey Mike, can you send me a link to the surgery podcast? And we'll send that over. Owen has said, what is the proper technique for bending forward if I have a herniation to avoid symptoms? It really varies, but this is why you're learning the squat and the hip hinge, because you're going to bend forward in some way, shape or form. So we need to learn how to squat effectively with a neutral spine, so we're not rounding the lower back. We also need to learn how to hip hinge, because the hip hinge keeps a neutral spine, keeps the spine in the strongest position. But the reality is you live in the real world, right? You're gonna have to maybe have some kind of kneeling to standing movements. So we engage the core, we come down into a kneeling position so we can get down here and we can do whatever we need to do to try and keep our spine in the most neutral position. In other scenarios, we can come down like so. Again, we're prioritizing the lower back. This is the thing here though. A lot of you guys don't have strong legs. You don't have competent musculature in this region. And then you've also got a back problem on top of that. And the problem is that when we've got a back injury, we want to try and compensate. We want to use other things. So here, I'm putting more strain under the knees to do this, to keep my back in a better position because I need to go down here. But some of you guys won't have strong ankles and knees, so that then creates knee issues. And that's a difficult position to be in. You don't have anything to rely on. It's a very common position for people to be in. So you've just got to do the best you can. And this is the reality about the insistence on starting your rehab immediately. Because Owen's still going to do stuff every single day. No matter how bad his back is, he's going to have to go and pick that thing up off the floor because the little one just left it there and they need it. And so you do the best you can, but you focus on your rehab work. And that really is such an important thing. So all too often people are like, I'll wait until I'm feeling better to start the rehab. All the while they're doing all sorts of things. You do the best you can, and maybe you create a bit of support. Maybe you go down on one knee. Maybe you use that funny squatting technique, going up on the toes. It's not ideal. It's not correct squatting form. But it's back-friendly squatting form to make the best of a bad job right now. And that's why it's so important that long-term, when you guys come out of the back injury, that you actually keep up the rehabilitative work so that long-term you don't have these kind of problems, that you have an adaptive reservoir to take strain off an area when it's injured. And that's what we're trying to build up as well. Holly has asked, what exercises target the core? I think Holly's asked that, but she just disappeared. All right, we'll go over to another one. Unless that pops back up again. I have 2 bulging lumbar discs after a car accident. How will my pre-existing scoliosis affect recovery? One of the issues with scoliosis is that it's going to put more compressive strain on one side of the spine and more stretching strain on the other. And you might notice that there's symptoms on one side versus the other. The most important thing is you just focus on the rehabilitation in a symmetrical manner as best you can and move forwards from there. It will explain why it's maybe one-sided more than the other, the symptoms that you might experience in terms of the pain. in terms of which tissues have been injured, but it doesn't really need to be that much a part of the recovery process, if that makes sense. And having Lara with a scoliosis and mum with a significant scoliosis, visible on X-ray, measured on X-ray, you know, the best thing you can, having intimate experience with this specifically, the best thing you can do in these sorts of scenarios is just be strong. Like, you're going to get injuries just like anyone else without a scoliosis. It's just that you've got little quirks about yours, but you still need to be able to move around the real world. You still need to be able to get up out of a chair. You still need to be able to do many things. And so the squat and the hip hinge form the foundation. When you do things like single leg hip hinges, when you do things like step ups, you will probably notice that one side is a little bit stronger than the other and that kind of stuff. And it's maybe a bit more pronounced. And so you will work on those as you go forwards with the rehabilitation approach. But at the end of the day, it's the same old stuff. It's the same old stuff. It's not complicated, but that's just another variable. Acute pain, waiting for MRI. Should I do repair stretches or stay until the pain is gone? Danny, when we have injuries, if we're waiting for an MRI, what are we doing every day? Very important question, reflection point. So many people will say, I will wait until I get my scan before I do anything. It's like, no. You're doing stuff every day. You're just doing a bunch of stuff that could be bad for your back. So you start off learning how to engage the core. You start off learning some of the things that we teach in the program about stabilizing the spine and real spine movements, and you do some relief-based work. The MRI, you probably already know, if you've got a good clinician, they already have the suspicion that you've probably injured something in the lower lumbar spine. The MRI will tell you whether it's bulged to the left, to the right, whether it's 8 mil or 3 mil or whatever it may be, whether it's not that significant, or whether it's a raging herniation. In all of those scenarios, there are none where doing the rehab work is not going to be appropriate. We actually did a full podcast on this, so you can always send us a DM and I'll send you a link to the more thought-through version of that particular of this answer. But you start the rehab. You just don't need to wait, because you're doing things every day that are worse for your back. The rehab that you do is the safest time of your day. Everything else is uncontrolled variables. Everything else has a potential to aggravate you. But your rehab, when it's done with proper intention and proper focus, proper care, that's the safest time of your entire day. If you could spend all day doing your rehab and had to do nothing else, that might even be a good thing to do, right? You probably get a bit bored of it, but you know, you get the idea. That's the only time you're actually focused. When the doorbell rings and you have to jump out of the chair or run in from the other room, you're not focused on your back. You're focused on getting to the doorbell before that parcel goes back the other way. And that's the reality, right? We've got the ideal and we've got the reality. And what we talk about a lot tries to acknowledge as a most essential point, the reality that you guys live in. You're not in a little test tube in suspended animation with your bad back while you wait for the MRI. You're living every day. So you may as well start to make some improvements rather than leaving things until you get that scan in 4, 6, 8 weeks, months, whatever it may be. Unfortunately, it tends to be on the higher end of that here in the UK. I've had nerve blocks and said no to a spinal fusion, debating the nerve burn. Do the rehab work. We had a lady on, used to comment a lot on our TikTok comments. She was waiting for that, the radio frequency ablation, I think it was, or it was a rhizotomy. I can't remember the exact procedure she was having. But anyway, it was one of those, burning the nerves. And she started doing the rehab and she's like, I'm so glad I didn't go ahead with that. Because quite often you guys, like, you've been doing hugging the knees, child's pose, you've given up and you're just doing whatever you can. You've tried to retreat from life and you're still struggling. And you're like, well, I may as well just burn the nerves off and then I can't feel it. And it's like, no, do some rehab, commit to it for a period of time. Because you can always go and have that procedure if you absolutely want to afterwards. But if you really know that you haven't actually done this kind of stuff, you try. And that's the great thing about those core 5 exercises, right? The dead bug, the marching bridge, the squat, the hip hinge, step up. If you can do all of those perfectly and you can do them with load, sure, go and have it, right? Maybe you could make that case. Maybe you could make that case. But I almost guarantee you can't do any of those things. So you've got huge room for improving your body before you go down an irreversible path of having a procedure. And so that's really well worth working on. It's hard, it's not easy. It can be painful because you're not very good at these things, but it's making you better. It's you making you better, not relying on someone else to fix it. And that's a really empowering position. That should be the default, but it's all too often not the default. Guys, those of you on YouTube, if anyone is watching on X, I don't know if they are or not, but do let us know. And if you guys have any questions on YouTube, you can always post down in the comments. If you guys need any more help, what time are we at? We are at 34 minutes. We've got 25 minutes left, guys. If any of you guys need any more help, you can always check out the link in the website or in the chat on YouTube or in the profile page to the information about the program. We've got some exciting stuff coming out this weekend, which will be well worth checking out as well. So Any of you guys have been struggling and you need more help, definitely check out the program, because that will be a really helpful tool for you, without a shadow of a doubt. That's kind of the best. What have we got here? Herniated a disc 3 weeks ago, 3 small kids, struggling to do anything physical. What can I do? If you've got 3 young kids, so when we had Celeste at the start of the year and Evelyn a couple of years ago, you know, you really realize, man, if you've got a herniated disc and you've got young kids, you know, ours are 2 and a bit and 7 months, 8 months, like that's tough. That's the hardest job. People often say, do I need to quit my job because of my back pain, because of my herniated discs? And it's so tough when you've got young kids. And what's even worse is if we don't realize, or we don't just make the explicit link between having to look after the kids and our back. Sometimes I get parents that are in the membership and they're like, oh, I've got a newborn. Or it's like, I've got a really bad back. I've got a herniated disc. It keeps on flaring up. I don't know why. I'm not doing anything. And then later on in the conversation, it's like, oh yeah, my wife had a child like 4 weeks ago. And you're like, you're not doing anything? You don't think you're not doing anything? As a parent, changing nappies, putting kids in cots, all that, you don't think you're doing anything that might be explaining your bad back? And as soon as you do, you're like, oh, because one thing that's really, really affects you up here is thinking there's no reason for the pain that you're experiencing. But the reality is that if we've got small kids, yes, even if you've got small kids, you can get better. You just have to be more diligent. You have to do your best to be more disciplined and try and carve out time as best you can to do the rehabilitation work. Be more conscientious as best you can. Do more of the relief-based work. Things like the bed decompression when you're in bed at night to help take a bit of pressure off the lower back. Regularly using, there are tools like, for example, I don't have it here, the contrast therapy cube from Recovery Therm. From Therabody, the Recovery Therm cube, that allows you to do contrast bathing with a strap around your back and you stick it on your lower back, and that helps manage the inflammation. That's not getting you stronger, but that helps manage things. That's relief-based, right? You've got these massage guns, using those. Being as disciplined as you possibly can to create the best possible environment to offset the challenge of looking after 3 young kids. That's all you can do. But the good news is that's all you need to do to actually get better. If you do that well, you will find that you start to do better and better and better. Oh, Charlie said, I ordered the contrast cube, love it. Yeah, it's such a game changer. Like, it really, really is. It's cold when you put it on, right? Because I put it on at the front, press the buttons and slide it around, and it's like quite cold on your tummy. But if you put it on over a t-shirt, it's really good. I would definitely, you can get it on Amazon, whether you're here in the US, whether you're here whether you're over in the UK, whether you're here in the UK or over in the US, you can order it on Amazon, and like, it's well worth it, I would say. What else have we got here? Other comments and questions. I had a bad flare-up from F45. I'm thinking it's bulging or herniated. Yeah, guys, we normally see that kind of stuff in January, February. People getting into these fitness classes, they injure themselves. There's focus on intensity over form, and that's just the way it is, right? You go to a lot of these classes, Barry's boot camp, all that kind of stuff, and you don't walk away from that class going, do you know what, Sarah, John, I had a great class this morning. We spent 15 minutes doing a warm-up and practicing technique on squats. Then we did some slow repetitions, focusing on the fact that my knees were going in a funny direction and really fixing that. And by the end of the class, I felt really accomplished. That's not what people talk about when they go to those kind of classes. The measure with which you measure success is whether you feel like you died at the end of the class. And so that is not conducive with recovering from a back injury, with, I would argue, fitness. Go and do something else first. A lot of people, even in the gym working, themselves, do not have appropriate levels of coordination and control and all that kind of stuff. And so get that first and then go and hammer yourself at one of these classes. And yeah, there's a good chance that maybe we did strain something. The most important thing, especially if it was quite recent, Brendan, is to get stuck into the rehab work, creating the environment for healing, doing exercises or relief-based practices like those. If you're on TikTok here, you can go over to the playlist page, just click the profile up there, and there's a back pain relief routine. On YouTube, there's that same routine. And for those of you that want to join the membership, there's that kind of stuff in there as well, to provide regular relief for those injured discs. And then you've got to get working on the rehab work and start to plug some of the gaps. Some of the technical errors that you've been making in your workouts will not carry over. You won't be allowed to make those mistakes as you're going back through the recovery process. and I suggest maybe give F45 a little bit of a break. Focus on doing some more controlled and steady rehab work, building back up load tolerance, and then by all means you can transition back into those classes. Because I do know that like a lot of people really love the community aspect and all that kind of stuff with these kind of classes. It's the same as yoga, it's the same as Pilates. There's no reason you guys can't get back into those things, but it's about strategy. It's about building the foundation so you can enjoy those things, and the education so you can actually tailor those things to make them even more helpful for you in the future if you want to go to Reformers Pilates. And maybe like the long-term strategy is that you're doing some element of spinal loading work once or twice a week, like hard resistance training. You're doing some element of cardio. You've got a little bit of a yoga or Pilates class over there. Or maybe you want to do something else like an F45 for the cardio component and the social component. And like that's what you want to build, but you build that at the end once the job is done. You don't build it at the start while you're struggling with rehab. Too many people fall into that trap, and it ends up stopping you getting back to those things that you really want to do and enjoy. Do you have the best rehabilitation routine because stretching and walking isn't helping? Stretching and walking, yes, we do have the best rehabilitation routine. That's the program. So I would join that. Go and check out the link in the profile page. We just literally shot a new video for some of the significant updates that are coming this weekend with the program, which is absolutely awesome. So I've definitely checked that out right now or after this live stream. But that's the reason you're not getting better, because you're doing stretching and walking. Stretching and walking is not rehab. That's what so many of you guys have been doing before you started. You're doing your knee hugs, your child's pose. You might be messing around with some bridges on the floor, right? Thinking that that's doing strengthening. You might be doing some clamshells. And then you're doing like your knee hugs, your child's pose. You're doing some hamstring stretching, your static flossing. None of that is rehabilitation. Explain to me which repetition of the knee hug is going to be the one that results in your back getting stronger objectively. There is not one. We had one of the members posting in the group, said, oh, before I joined the program, I'd done about 1 million Cobras. It's like, was it 1,375,224 that was the one that was going to all of a sudden fix? Like, that's not how those work. And the problem is that you can understand this very, very quickly if you just ask your practitioner, your chiro, your osteo. You're going to say, explain to me the mechanism by which this strategy, this treatment, this thing is improving my health, my back health specifically. Because sometimes there are indirect effects, right? I discussed the other day, how does my chiropractor help me? How does my osteopath help me? How does my physio help me? They might, if they don't have good tech in there, if they haven't invested in good tech like we have, over here we've got the decompression table behind, we've got the laser the other room, and even if that, you've got to pair it with rehab, right? It doesn't do the work for you, unfortunately, or fortunately. But like say they're just doing manual hands-on treatment. How do they help you? Because they can't heal the disc. They can't really do anything reliable to the disc that's injured at L5-S1. What they can do is they can get your neck moving a bit better, your thoracic spine moving a bit better, your hips moving a bit better. They can loosen off some of the stiffness in your legs. They can help with that. Your adaptation to training that you're doing, your rehab you're doing, they can help you with that so that they can have second order benefits on the healing process in your lower back, removing some of those barriers. If your neck works a little bit better when you're pulling out and checking your blind spot while you're driving, you're not grinding your lower back because you can actually turn your neck. You're not getting stuck and having to twist your lumbar spine and crank round on that disc. Like those little things have an impact, and that's how they can help. If you're talking about other things, there are discussions that should be possible to be had by your individual practitioner that's doing those treatments. And they should be able to communicate that to you. If they can't, then have they really thought it through that well? So should I be doing strengthening? But what if it hurts really badly after? It usually does. One of the misconceptions that people make here, which is exactly this misconception, is that it hurts after strengthening. You don't just go and start, like there's a 60 kilos on the bar behind me, right? That bar. You don't start your strengthening doing that. You start your strengthening learning how to squat, learning how to hip hinge with correct form. You should be doing aggravation-free form with correct choreography. Too many people go, well, I'm going to go and do strengthening, and they just go to the gym. Like, what are you doing going to the gym? You have no idea what you're doing. You don't have a clue. Why should you? You haven't been educated in that regard. That's about the same as me going trying to fix the toilet. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I don't have a clue. And so that's one of the reasons why we put so many tutorial videos out. So you can have a clue, you can have an idea, but you don't go to the gym and do training. You go to the gym and maybe experiment with a tutorial video to learn how to do that, or maybe you go and speak to a trainer or something like that to learn how to do the exercise. You can definitely learn on your own for sure, but you don't just go to the gym and do training and strengthening. And that's the problem, right? In order for the exercise to be, this is the stuff we teach members in the program. In order for your rehab to be effective, you need to first learn how to perform the exercise correctly without aggravation. And that can take longer than a session. It can take a week. Some people, it takes a little bit longer because they're really not very good. Other people, it takes a little bit less time. It varies from one individual to the next. But you need to learn how to actually protect this spine when you're performing these kind of movements. And then once you learn how to protect the spine, from there, you can then start to scale the difficulty. So you've learned how to actually perform a squat. You've learned how to do that, right? So then you're going to go and grab like a 5 kilo and you're going to do a squat holding onto the 5 kilo. And then and this is the stuff we're talking in the new program or the updates to the program. We're talking about this in phase 3, right? It's discovery. Discovering what level of intensity is necessary to allow you to challenge the back, but not cause aggravation. Very, very important. Training is a fine line between creating enough tissue damage in the target tissues that we're trying to get to adapt and causing so much that we don't recover for it. And then what have we said here? I've been 5 months, I have volleyball in a month and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get back better as I don't have much time. Unfortunately, you don't have the luxury of choosing whether you've got enough time or not. Your body changes at the pace it changes at. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And it would be wrong to suggest that you can game that system. Like tissues heal at the rate they heal at. And if we're doing volleyball, that's a lot of jumping and bounding and leaping and bounding. Like you're not going to make a certain amount. That's not to say you can't be significantly better in a relatively short period of time. But there's no way you're going to be moving through huge amounts of weight to build load tolerance in that time frame. You might be able to get competent at certain things and build a degree of change, but it's like this today, literally I've just done some bench press. I was doing 110 kilos on the flat bench and I just managed to get 4 reps on the last set, which was great, right? Last week I did three reps and I've not been so well the last few days, right? So if I had a bench press competition in 2 weeks time or a month's time, I'm not benching 180. It's not happening. Like even if I took tons of steroids, for example, I'm not going to be able to do that because tissues don't adapt in that time frame. So we have to, of course, set our expectations. And it's wrong to misguide people into thinking that, yeah, sure, I can bench press 180 in 4 weeks. It's not happening. It's just not happening because tissues have rules that they have to operate under. And so I appreciate it's been 5 months and that really sucks. And there's people that it's been 5 years. But you have to go at the rate that your tissues are going to adapt. And you have to start making progress. So, yeah, maybe not necessarily the message we want to hear, but that's what you got to do, right? Do you think I may not be able to play in 2 months? I don't know where you are. And this is the kind of stuff that we help our members with, right? It's not really the kind of thing that you can do effectively on a TikTok live. So if you need help, join the program and get to work. That would be the best bit of advice. You've got a serious target, so get with serious resources and start working on it. And I'm sure you can do very, very well, but you equally need to also set appropriate targets as well. What have we got here? Nando, I fixed mine with many of the exercises I found on your channel in a week. That's awesome. One of the important misconceptions though, in this sort of scenario, Nando, is what does fixed mean, right? Because healing and remodeling doesn't take place in a week. Things can really calm down very quickly, especially if we're a bit younger or if we've got other things going for us. Things can really calm down very quickly. But that's why the exercises are so very helpful, because the question people have to ask is, how do I know when I'm healed? And the question is, healed for what? Right? So it might be that Nando can now squat and hip hinge 50, 60 kilos. In the example of going back to the volleyball, it might be that we can only squat or hip hinge 5 kilos. And we know for a fact that when you use 7.5 kilos, it hurts the back. So if that's the case, going back to volleyball isn't going to be a good idea. But equally, if we're up to like 50, 60, 70 kilos and we can do that for 10 reps without any aggravation, we've been through the steps in order correctly without aggravation, then maybe we can get back to these things. We don't know until we start. But the nice thing about proper rehabilitation work is if you're doing rehabilitation work for your lower back, the proper stuff, such as the squats and the hip hinges in particular, then you have the best information available to understand how strong your back is, and then you can try and apply that or compare that to the kinds of stresses and strains that you might be exposed to in the chosen sport. What else we got? I appreciate advice has been tough. I can't even jog, and at 17 it sucks. Yeah, just get started on the rehab. That's all you can do. And there's no reason you can't get back to doing the things you want to do, but they need to take place in the appropriate timeframes. And so just work. You've got youth going for you if you're only 17, and that's awesome, right? But there are also, challenges in the young because we tend to be more impatient. And we tend to get distracted when things start to feel better. And there's other examples that That everybody has different circumstances. You don't have 3 young kids like we were discussing earlier. Other people do. Other people are retired. They've got age against them, but they've got wisdom, hopefully, on their side. So there's always trade-offs. Soul Surfer said, the only one that can heal you is yourself. And that is definitely true. You are the one that heals. No one is healing you. Pat Lads Chan has said, walking is really good for my L5 herniation. I've done a few city breaks and lots of walking, improved a lot. Awesome. It's all relative. Lifting some weight with a disc injury is as impressive as lifting lots of weight with not an injury. Yeah, we might get... The reason that we're looking to lift weight is so that we have an idea of the kind of stress and strain our disc is capable of bearing. And so we are driving the recovery and re-strengthening process in that spine. And so while walking is great, as we discussed at the start of the podcast, walking is not rehabilitation. And sometimes walking can, because it feels good and because it feels nice on the lower back for reasons that we discussed at the start of the live stream, walking can turn into something that we think is actually keeping us well. And actually, no, walking is great for walking, but walking is walking. Walking is not building strength. We are designed to walk fundamentally. And you wouldn't be designed, if you're designed to do something, it's very quickly going to become not an adaptive, not a stimulation that is going to result in adaptation. And so we have to have that rehabilitation work building us. It's not about what's impressive and what's not impressive. That's really irrelevant. We shouldn't be comparing ourselves to others in our rehab. We should only compare ourselves to ourselves. That no one cares, or no one should care or be caring. Obviously, we should care about one another and that kind of stuff, but we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to other people. Everybody has different circumstances. Is the person that has 3 young kids compared to the person who's a teenager recovering from back pain, is one more impressive than the other? That's a zero. That's not a game that's profitable for anyone. What is important is, how strong was I last week? How strong am I next week? How strong am I in 3, 4, 5, 6 months' time? How effective have I been rebuilding my back health? Because ultimately, you don't rebuild your back health so you can brag about it. You rebuild your back health so you can go and enjoy life and not have flare-ups and not have pain and not miss out on family events or family holidays. That's all that matters. And so it's just a means to an end in many ways. So yeah, thanks for bringing that out. That was awesome. Chris has said, given discs can't regenerate, is there a risk discs can regenerate? Is there a risk that a few herniations in the same place can lead to a thinning disc? There certainly is risk that a thinning, that if you lose material, so a couple of things here from a clarification point of view. If you lose this material, it is not going back. Once you've lost this, so you've had the sequestration, we've had the extrusion, the various herniations to various degrees. If it's gone, it isn't going back, and therefore you will lose the height, because it is the amount of material in here. Like, for example, if we've got a water balloon and some of the fluid leaks out, the balloon is going to be smaller, and that's the way that it is. So that's true. But the annular fibers do heal. They do remodel. That's almost self-evident by the fact that you can test the integrity of those structures, and they are very, very poor. We can't even bear the load of carrying 5 kilos. And then we've rebuilt our rehabilitation to the point where we can bear the load of carrying 50, 100 kilos. Very clearly, these structures have healed to a degree. Now, we can make bones about the degree to which they heal, and we can also make the statement very accurately that they will never be the same again. This is never going to be this. But as we discussed on the Healing Herniated Discs podcast, I think fundamentally, the fact that they will never be the same again is often something that causes people to be deeply depressed and despondent. And what it really is, I feel, is that it is a cap on what is possible in the adaptation of that disc. So for example, everybody here watching right now, and you guys watching on YouTube maybe after the fact, your disc has a certain capacity when you were born, right? And we could maybe look at the world of elite sports that demonstrates the flexibility of the disc, the low tolerance of the disc in the powerlifting arena. I know very recently, I think it was Halfthor broke a world record in the deadlift. I think it was like a 505 kilos, right? So very clearly, in the individual with a spine, which is everybody, with discs, which is everybody, there is the capacity to get somewhere near that kind of thing. If all of the resources of your life were set up in such a way that you had the time, freedom, money to support the adaptation of your discs to extreme levels of strain. It's possible, the upper limit. And I used this example in a recent podcast about comparing you to a Ferrari, right? For some individuals in the elite space, they have the time, effort, and energy to devote resources to build up that Ferrari so that they're driving it around, this spine, around at 200 miles an hour when the top speed is 220. But most of you and I are driving, maybe if we're particularly active and have been working out a lot and that kind of stuff, maybe we've been driving our car around, even though it's capable of 220, 240 miles an hour, we've been driving around 150. But most people have been driving around at 30 to 40 miles an hour. They don't have appropriate conditioning. They haven't built anywhere near what's possible for the human body. So when we have a disc herniation, sure, that car's never going to drive around at 220 miles an hour, but it's probably capped at 200. And so if you spent the rest of your life devoted to rebuilding strength and integrity to that disc, you could get it much stronger than you could possibly imagine, but there will be a cap. And I think the most helpful way of thinking about this is there is once we have a disc herniation or an injury of significant magnitude, there is always going to be an upper cap on what is possible with regards to the adaptive potential of that section of the spine and therefore you as an individual. But for more or less everybody, apart from the elite sportsman, and we did once get actually someone who was trying to be an elite powerlifter comment after this topic discussion on a video. But in everybody apart from that person, which is basically all of you, you don't have the intention, the desire, or the time to test yourself to that level. So all this limit of the disc will never be the same again is a functional upper limit that you will, or is a theoretical upper limit that you will never even reach anyway. So don't set yourself unnecessary limitations on what's possible because of your injury. That's the most important takeaway. Don't artificially say, well, I'm never going to be stronger than I am, because you haven't by any way, shape or form spent your entire life trying to rebuild or build, before you'd injured it, the best possible, strongest, healthiest disc you could. And so you're not going to do that going forwards. But with even a little bit of effort, it's very, very reasonable that even those of you with significantly bad backs can be an awful lot stronger than you have been before this point. Because most people that injure their backs, a large number, haven't actually been looking after them effectively over the years, haven't been devoted. And that's why we've got the injury. You've been driving around at 30 miles an hour when you could have taken this thing with the right training up to 180, 200. And so that's a very, very important point to really let sink in, especially if you're feeling a bit despondent and being told your disc is never going to be the same again. It's never going to have the upper limit capacity that it had when you were born. But the limits that you've got on that disc, I think functionally, you're never going to reach those limits. As long as you do the right rehab work, just keep going and see how far you can take it. Mickey has said, L5-S1 protrusion, any idea of when the pain leaves? When you start doing the rehab work to get stronger. You have to change your body, and that's what the rehab work does. You do the work on the rehab front. Can you squat? Can you hip hinge? Can you do the dead bug? Can you do the marching bridge? Can you do those things at a significant level? If you're not doing those if you're doing those with less than 10, 15, 20, 30 kilos, do them with more. Everybody needs to get to a different point of compensation, of building up strength and stability, and their symptoms go at different points along that process. But what's for guaranteed is if you are not at the point where, like we discussed earlier on, if you're not doing that 40%, 90%, or 100% of your body weight on a squat, hip hinge, and step up, squat and hip hinge, not the step up, then get to that first. Focus on building strength and integrity and notice that your symptoms change over the course of that pursuit, rather than waiting for the pain to go away. How long for a disc herniation to heal? It really depends. So here's a great example. If you're on a building site, right, and you get told, dig a 6-foot hole over here, and we're getting towards the end of the hour. So guys, if you've got any more questions, you can always post them in the comments. We will be wrapping up shortly. So you're on a building site. This is about healing. How long does it take to heal? You're on the building site and the guy says, dig a 6-foot hole over here. He comes back an hour later. You're sat there waiting like, hey, cool. And he comes back and you've dug the hole over here. You've dug 6 foot. What you've also done is you spent the last few hours digging that 6-foot hole over here and you've thrown 2 foot of dirt on this side. The clock doesn't start 2 or 3 hours ago when you started digging the first hole. The clock starts when you start digging in the right actual place. And so many people have been struggling for months, maybe even longer, with a herniated disc that just keeps on getting flared up and they're doing the wrong sort of things. And then they go, well, I've started doing the right sort of exercises. Why am I not better? It's been 6 months. It's like, but you've only been doing the right sort of stuff for the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And you have to undo a lot of bad stuff. You have an extra 2 foot of dirt you've got to dig through before you get to the start of the 6-foot hole. And that's something that so many people don't appreciate. Like, it starts when you start doing the right sort of stuff. Healing is trying to take place every single day, but you're getting in the way of the recovery process because we're not doing the right sort of things. And so it varies from one individual to the next. And then the question is, healed for what? This is the most important question. People say, how do I know when it's healed? Healed for what? Is it healed enough for you to go and sit in the cinema for an hour? Is it healed enough for you to walk down the street? Is it healed enough for you to go and play jiu-jitsu? Is it healed enough for you to go and run a marathon? Healed for what? And that's why your strengthening training, your rehabilitation work with your load-bearing exercises is the most important thing, because that gives you that measure. Are you healed enough to pick up a 60-kilo bar and do 10 reps without any trouble? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I don't know. You don't know. You don't know until you try. Obviously, carefully building up. You don't try and start there. That's not going to be good. Ryder said, how does the strength training help the herniation go away? So that's a very good question. How does rehabilitation work? How does rehabilitation work? So firstly, if we take just one of the examples of the squat, how does the squat help your back heal the herniation? Number one, nothing helps the herniation go away. The herniation is trying to heal every single day. So that's the most important thing to understand from the get-go. When we're doing the squat, we are learning a movement that we do every day. So the first short-term benefit is that because you can now squat correctly, when you're getting up and down out of chairs, you're not doing things that are constantly re-aggravating the herniation. So the technical improvement in the short term helps you stop irritating the herniation so that the healing that it's trying to do cannot be interrupted every 5 minutes, every time you get out of the office chair or every time you get in the car, etc., etc. You get more coordination and awareness of how to do these things, so you are more resilient to stupid little things, flaring the herniated disc up, picking the scab, re-aggravating the wound. In the medium term, you actually build strength and stability around the muscles, etc., and become more competent at that movement so that healing can continue to take place further. Just look at a scab on the surface of your skin. If you've ever had a cut or graze, you pick it off the first week, it bleeds all over the place. You pick it off a little bit later on, and there's like pink skin underneath, right? And so but it doesn't bleed because more healing has taken place because of time. So by building strength and resilience in this midsection through your exercises and objectively getting stronger, we're just talking about the muscles still here, you create more and more resilience to unnecessary flare-ups, picking the scab, so to speak, that allow healing to gather more momentum, right? And then, this is the important part, the longer term, as you are starting to apply more and more load, you will start to provide the stimulation necessary to tell these annular fibers that are starting to heal up now and have got some good momentum, tell them how strong they need to be. I used to deadlift 230 something kilos. If I did that now, I'd herniate something. I am not strong enough to do that, because conditioning is a plastic process. If you do not keep it up, it will come down. Can I get back up to that? Sure, I'd have to devote myself to training. I'd have to tell my discs and other structures in my body how strong they need to be. Your rehab coming out of the injury is the same process. It's just with smaller numbers. And so that's how your rehab helps you get stronger. That's how it helps herniated disc. And what happens is, in the early instances, the annular fibers are just patching together. So you will have a re-MRI, or you could have a re-MRI, and you won't see much difference. But you're feeling loads better, you haven't got as much inflammation, you're not sore as often, but the disc herniation is still there because it's going to patch up around there, obviously depending on the exact circumstances and the exact nuances of your injury, but it will patch up around there and the disc herniation might well still be present, and then it might well start to go back in. They don't always go back in, but in a lot of cases there is that resolution. It might be that, like this, you're stuck there, right? And it's only these outer layers that are going to really heal up and strengthen up, right? There's fewer here on this side than there are on this side because these ones are still intact, but on this side they're broken through. And so maybe these ones are just going to strengthen up. The body can adapt tremendously given the time and consistency. But in terms of rebuilding strength and resilience to tissues, the body really needs to know that it's worthwhile. So you don't do one session and expect everything to be hunky-dory. You don't do one session, like I can't do bench press once and expect my chest to be stronger. You have to do it consistently. You have to do your rehab work consistently over time. I'm gonna wrap it up here because I'm overrunning now, guys. So hopefully that's been really helpful for you guys. If any of you guys need any more help, any more guidance, you've got the link that I posted in the chat on the YouTube, and I'll put that as a pinned comment as well if you're watching this after the fact. You can check out the program. Those of you guys on TikTok, you can always check out the link up here for the for the profile page. We've got playlists there. We've also got a link to the program as well. Very, if you're struggling, go and check that out. That's going to be what's going to help you. And I'll finish up with this last question from Sam. I have spondylolisthesis and my back's locked. What can I do to release it, please? When you've got spondylolisthesis, that is a great example of a more complete or significant back injury. And everything we're talking about spine stability, learning how to stabilize the spine so you can protect that region of the lower back, rebuilding resilience in that lower back is so very important. And long term, if you've built load tolerance in that lumbar spine, carefully, slowly over the years, or months, 2 years, focusing on spine stability and aggravation-free reps with correct choreography, you will find that you then want to start adding in a degree of hip mobility to mean that the lower back has to do less for the long term. You want to have greater flexibility in the hips compared to the average person, and you'll do well. We've had many members come through the program with spondylolisthesis of varying degrees. Retrolisthesis too, it's fundamentally the same sort of issue. An instability at the level of the lumbar spine, most commonly L4-5 and L5-S1. And you can check out Janet's story specifically. If you want to send us, Sam, if you want to send us a DM, just say, hey Mike, can you send me a link to Janet's story? It's on the wall just out there. I've shown you guys before, but it's on the website as well. And she had a grade 2 spondylolisthesis, and it's quite a nice little feature that was in one of the magazine newspapers over here in the UK. So thanks for joining, guys. Hopefully it's been helpful. If you guys have any other questions, you can always check out the program and the various resources and links that are on the website. Thanks, YouTube. And X, if you saw this, awesome.